The air of Alexandria in the year 33 AD did not smell like a city. It smelled like the world. Salt from the Mediterranean mixed with the scent of spices unloaded from Arabia, incense from the south, olive oil from Greece, and fish pulled fresh from Egyptian waters. The harbor never truly slept. Ships arrived from every corner of the Roman Empire. Sailors shouted in Greek. Merchants bargained in Egyptian. Jewish traders spoke Aramaic. Roman officials barked orders in Latin. It was a city of endless movement, a city where continents met. For a black man living in the time of Jesus, there was no greater city in Africa than Alexandria. Founded by Alexander the Great 3 centuries earlier, it had become one of the largest cities on earth. Nearly 500,000 people lived there. Wealth flowed through its ports. Ideas flowed through its libraries. Goods flowed through its markets. To walk through Alexandria was to walk through the center of the known world. A black traveler leaving his home in the southern lands of Egypt or Kush would have been overwhelmed by the city's scale. Streets stretched wider than anything seen in smaller towns. Massive stone buildings lined the avenues. Statues towered above the crowds. The famous lighthouse of Alexandria rose above the harbor like a giant watching over the sea. It was one of the wonders of the ancient world. At night, its fire guided ships for miles away. During the day, it dominated the skyline. Families lived in crowded apartment-like buildings several stories high. Wealthy merchants occupied spacious homes decorated with mosaics and courtyards. Poor laborers lived in cramped quarters near workshops and markets. Children played in narrow alleys. Women carried baskets through crowded streets. Artisans hammered bronze, carved stone, and wove cloth. Everywhere there was noise. Everywhere there was life. Black Africans were not strangers here. They were merchants, sailors, laborers, soldiers, craftsmen, and officials. Some had arrived from Nubia and Kush. Others had lived in Egypt for generations. Many Jews also called Alexandria home. Their community was one of the largest outside Judea. Synagogues filled entire neighborhoods. Families gathered to read scripture. Children learned traditions passed down from their ancestors. The city was diverse, but life was not equal. Wealth and poverty existed side by side. Roman power was visible everywhere. Taxes were heavy. Corruption was common. Yet people came because opportunity existed here in a way few places could match. For a black merchant, Alexandria offered access to customers from across the empire. For a scholar, it offered knowledge. For a sailor, it offered employment. For a pilgrim, it offered a gateway to Jerusalem. Beyond the markets and harbors, life followed a familiar rhythm. Families woke before sunrise. Bread was baked. Water was carried. Shops opened. Animals were fed. Business began. The city might have been enormous, but ordinary life still revolved around family, work, and faith. Yet Alexandria was only one city. Hundreds of miles to the west stood another place known throughout the Roman world. Cyrene. The journey there followed the North African coast, across fertile lands and rolling hills. Unlike Alexandria, Cyrene was quieter. Smaller. Less crowded. But it was prosperous. Olive groves stretched across the countryside. Farmers cultivated wheat and barley. Merchants exported goods across the Mediterranean. The city itself sat on elevated ground where cooler air drifted in from the sea. White stone buildings reflected sunlight. Public squares buzzed with activity. Markets overflowed with produce, pottery, textiles, and imported goods. The people of Cyrene were a mixture of cultures. Greeks, Jews, Africans, Romans. Different languages echoed through the streets. Different traditions coexisted. For black families living here, daily life centered around trade, agriculture, and community. Children helped in family businesses. Fathers worked fields or managed shops. Mothers maintained households and passed traditions to the next generation. The synagogue stood at the center of Jewish life. Here families gathered to pray, learn, and preserve their identity. It was from this city that a man named Simon would eventually travel to Jerusalem. At the time, he was simply another resident. Another father. Another traveler. Another pilgrim preparing for Passover. He could not have imagined that history would remember his name forever. Across the Roman Empire, cities offered opportunities unavailable in villages. But they also brought challenges. Crowded housing. Disease. Crime. Political unrest. The poor often lived only a few streets away from the wealthy. Luxury and suffering existed side by side. For black people living in these cities, experiences varied dramatically. Some accumulated wealth through trade. Others struggled as laborers. Some served in Roman auxiliary units. Others worked as craftsmen, scribes, sailors, or merchants. Urban life was demanding. Yet cities connected people to opportunities, ideas, and movements that could transform entire lives. One such movement was unfolding in Judea. News traveled slowly, but rumors traveled fast. Stories spread along trade routes. Merchants carried information from city to city. Travelers exchanged news in marketplaces and inns. Across North Africa, people began hearing about a teacher from Galilee. A healer. A preacher. A man who spoke with authority unlike anyone else. His name was Jesus. By the spring of 33 AD, thousands of pilgrims were preparing for the annual journey to Jerusalem. Passover approached. Roads filled with travelers. Families packed supplies. Merchants prepared goods. Caravans formed. Ships crossed the Mediterranean carrying passengers toward Judea. Among them were black travelers from Egypt, Cyrene, and beyond. They traveled for worship. They traveled for tradition. They traveled because Jerusalem was the spiritual heart of their faith. The road to Jerusalem was long. Dust-coated clothing. Water had to be carefully rationed. Nights were spent in villages, inns, or beneath the open sky. Yet the hardships mattered little. Every year thousands made the same pilgrimage. The destination was worth the journey. Then Jerusalem appeared. Rising above the hills like a crown of stone. The city looked magnificent from a distance. White limestone walls reflected sunlight so brightly they seemed almost luminous. The temple dominated everything. Massive. Beautiful. Sacred. For many pilgrims, the first sight of Jerusalem was emotional. Some wept. Some prayed. Some sang psalms. The city normally held around 80,000 residents. During Passover, hundreds of thousands crowded its streets. Every courtyard was occupied. Every rooftop hosted families. Every available room was rented. The city became a living sea of humanity. For black travelers, Jerusalem felt different from Alexandria or Cyrene. It was less cosmopolitan. More religious. More intense. Every aspect of life revolved around the temple. Priests moved through crowds. Pilgrims carried sacrifices. Scholars debated scripture. Roman soldiers watched everything from the Antonia fortress. Tension filled the air. The streets were narrow. Markets overflowed. Animals crowded pathways. The smell of incense mixed with smoke from sacrifices. Lambs bleated. Merchants shouted. Pilgrims prayed. The city never seemed silent. Yet black people were not unknown here. Merchants arrived from Africa. Pilgrims traveled from distant communities. Soldiers from North African units occasionally appeared in Roman service. Visitors from Ethiopia, Egypt, and Cyrene moved through the crowds. Some stood out because of their appearance. Others blended into the multicultural flow of the Roman world. Jerusalem was not a city divided by modern concepts of race. It was divided by religion, citizenship, status, and power. The black traveler would have noticed the temple immediately. It dominated the skyline. White stone walls rose above surrounding buildings. Golden decorations reflected sunlight. Smoke drifted upward continuously from sacrifices offered throughout the day. Songs echoed across the courtyards. The temple was not merely a building. It was the center of an entire civilization. Every road seemed to lead toward it. Every conversation eventually returned to it. Every pilgrim dreamed of seeing it. But Jerusalem was also a city under occupation. Roman banners reminded everyone who truly ruled. Soldiers patrolled major streets. Their armor glinted in the sunlight. Their presence was impossible to ignore. The people resented them. Yet resistance was dangerous. Everyone understood the balance of power. It was into this environment that Jesus entered. News spread quickly. A teacher from Galilee had arrived. Crowds gathered. Rumors multiplied. Some called him a prophet. Others called him the Messiah. Still others considered him a threat. The black traveler heard the stories just as everyone else did. He joined crowds lining the roads. He listened to conversations in markets. He watched events unfold. He saw Jesus enter Jerusalem riding a donkey while crowds shouted praise. He saw excitement ripple through the city. He saw religious leaders grow uneasy. He saw Roman soldiers become more alert. Day after day the tension increased. Jesus taught openly. Crowds followed him. Authorities questioned him. The city felt as though it were waiting for something. Nobody knew exactly what. But everyone sensed it. Then came the arrest. The trial. The accusations. The condemnation. Jerusalem transformed almost overnight. Hope turned to confusion. Celebration turned to fear. Rumors spread faster than facts. Crowds gathered. Soldiers mobilized. Religious leaders pushed forward. The black traveler found himself witnessing events unlike anything he had ever seen. Then came the procession toward Golgotha. A man carrying a cross. A crowd following behind. Roman soldiers forcing order upon chaos. And among them another African. Simon of Cyrene. A man from the very city the traveler had passed through. A man suddenly pulled from the crowd and forced to carry the cross of Jesus. In that moment, the cities of Africa and the events of Jerusalem became connected forever. Alexandria. Cyrene. Jerusalem. 3 cities. 3 worlds. Yet all linked through trade routes, pilgrimages, families, and faith. The black traveler watched history unfold before his eyes. He had seen the markets of Alexandria. He had walked the streets of Cyrene. He had entered the gates of Jerusalem. He had witnessed the greatest city of Africa, the city of Simon, and the holy city itself. Each place revealed something different about life in the time of Jesus. Alexandria revealed opportunity. Cyrene revealed community. Jerusalem revealed destiny. For black people living 2,000 years ago, cities were places of work, worship, trade, family, and survival. They were places where cultures met, where opportunities emerged, where faith was practiced, and where lives could change forever. Some came seeking prosperity. Others came seeking knowledge. Others came seeking God. And in the spring of 33 AD, many found themselves standing at the center of the most important story the world would ever know. The cities were crowded. The streets were noisy. The politics were complicated. Life was difficult. Yet within those walls lived ordinary people raising families, building businesses, pursuing faith, and searching for meaning. Their lives were not separate from history. They were part of it. And among them were black men and women whose journeys carried them from Africa to the heart of the biblical world, where the story of Jesus would forever change the course of history.